visits someone in the hospital, almost in the stage of death. So he goes, puts on his collar, drives car to the hospital, medical center, and he goes around the parking lot and finds no parking at all. Finally, he had to go and visit the person. So he goes and parks at the handicapped parking spot. And while he goes out from his car to visit the person, he puts a note from the Our Father saying that, forgive us our trespasses, forgive my trespass, forgive my doing of parking in the handicapped parking lot. Then he goes and visits the person and comes back. Then there was a ticket, police issued a ticket. Then he thought, why would he do that? Then police wrote in a small note, lead us not into temptation. Priest thought he could use his faith and his knowledge to escape a ticket, but the police knew much more about his faith and his knowledge about faith. All the three readings today give us the central theme, the archetype of going on a hero's journey. Imagine someone from a dynasty taking on this journey into terra incognito, land unknown. A prince leaves his palace, goes on this search and adventure to find a land where there is plenty. Most of the movies give us this kind of themes. The Lord of the Rings, where are you going? And the guy answers, I am going to the unknown. That's how the story begins. You leave behind the familiar and embark and venture into the unknown territory. We have so many stories, so many movies, so many novels based on this kind of theme. But in doing so, the person who ventures onto this journey faces enemies, perhaps to fight battles, has a lot of difficulties, but he conquers. His opponents will try to kill him, but he will rise. So that is how this person who goes on this hero's journey establishes his reign in the land unknown, in terra incognito. He establishes his supremacy. Once he clears the land, he sends a message back to the kingdom, hey, I have conquered. I have made it clear. Now everybody else makes their way into this new territory. We can see this kind of move in scientific investigations, where nobody ever thought of. One guy gets an idea to invent the bulb. Everybody else now in the world enjoys electricity. This also happens in the discovery of the new land. How Christopher Columbus discovered America, how Vasco da Gama discovered India. And this is the classic theme in most of the stories. Leaving the familiar, adventure into the land unknown. This is also in moral achievements. Dr. Martin Luther King, he left the familiar and dared to venture into a new moral philosophy. Mother Teresa of Calcutta, she left the familiar in Yugoslavia and went into the unknown to India. And today we see the consequences, the results of leaving the familiar and daring into the unknown. It is said in theology, in the order of being, love comes first. But in the order of knowledge, faith comes first. To leave the familiar land and to venture into the unknown, faith is essential. Once your faith is cleared, then you can go to that land and establish the reign and the kingdom of love. In Latin it is said, lex orandi, lex credendi. The law of prayer is the law of belief. So all these guys who take upon this kind of hero's journey base themselves in this belief that they are ready to explore into the land unknown and make it the land of plenty, land of richness. Now, all our kids are beginning to go back to school, especially imagine a small kid going to school on the first day of his school, going to battle with so many teachers, right? New people. He is leaving the familiar home, right? He likes to sit back at home and play around. He thinks that summer should be longer, but he has to leave the familiar home and get into the school. Perhaps it is an unknown territory for him. If he doesn't do that, he can remain in the familiar land, but what will happen? He's not meant to be there. This is the key to progress. This is the key to growth. This is what our legends, our stories, our movies are built. We teach our kids to embark on a new journey. Not only the stories and legends, the Bible is full of such stories where you are called to leave the familiar land and venture into the unknown territory. But we have to get this. If you read the biblical literature, we have to get this. God is the one who is pushing us forward to leave the familiar and get into the unknown. He is the one prompting the journey. God of the Bible is the one continually calling people to move beyond, dramatically perhaps, to move beyond the familiar, from familiar to the unknown. So why are we talking about all this leaving the familiar and getting into the unknown land, terra incognito? Why? Second reading gives us that key. It unpacks to us what the first and the gospel readings are telling. Most of the time it is considered second reading has nothing to do with the readings, but it is the bridge that connects the first and the gospel in a very pleasing manner. Oftentimes we don't pay attention, but today's second reading gives us letter to the Hebrews highlighting Abraham as our father in faith. Before we unpack the second reading, once there was a rich dad who had a lot of property, millions of dollars worth business. So he was close to his retirement. He had 3 sons. But he didn't want to give just, okay, you take this much, you take this much, you take this much. He wanted to test them as to which one I can hand over my inheritance and my business. So he calls them, gives them $10 each. He tells them, there is room upstairs, there's nothing in the room, just totally empty room. I'm giving you $10, do whatever you want, go buy whatever you want, but fill the room to the full by the end of the day. What would you do? $10 only, don't use extra cent. What would you do to fill a room? Let's say the room size may be the size of this sanctuary, the altar size, okay, where this altar and all is. What would you do? What would you buy to fill the room? Candies? Penny candies, okay. Any imagination? Ice? Interesting. You're all thinking very creatively. Good. The first son went and bought cotton. So he tried to fill the room, but what happens? Cotton. The more you press, the more it goes down, it's compressed. But you cannot fill, you only have $10, mind you. He didn't fill the room. The second one goes and buys some lumber, some wooden furniture. He only had $10. He didn't fill the room. Third one thought, my 2 brothers failed. So he goes to the market, to Walmart, comes back, buys that something, comes back and gives back to dad $8. Dad, I needed only $2. I don't need $8. I don't need $10. So take the $8 rest remaining. He went to Walmart and bought a candle and a match, lit it and put it in the room. it was filled with light. That is faith. That is the faith. We are called to be that light. And Abraham was that. He was asked to leave the familiar. And he was only a small guy, a small person, an individual. To speak about faith is to speak about people ready to go on a hero's journey. Not a simple journey, a hero's journey. And Paul tells us, faith is the realization of what is hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. If anybody asks you, how do you define faith? Ask him to read the letter to the Hebrews. Faith is the realization of what is hoped for and evidence of things not seen. And this is nothing to do with anti-intellectualism. It is to do with adventure. It is to do with risking, trying something new. At 75, Abraham was asked to leave behind the familiar family and go to the unknown. In the quest of the promised land, he needs to risk. He needs to be that candle to bring light into the life of the entire Israel story. He faces numerous obstacles and opposition, but he trusted in God. That's why I said, in the order of being, love comes first. But in the order of knowledge, faith comes first. He had that faith. From this hero's journey, Abraham's journey, came the entire people of Israel. So it was from one man, as almost as dead, comes the descendants, as numerous as stars in the sky, and as numerous as sands on the seashore. Notice the words written. As dead as this one man, comes the descendants, as numerous as stars in the sky and as sand on the seashore. He was risking to leave the familiar. By this hero's journey, he cleared for so many centuries, for others, for the entire story of Israel, and pointed them towards that promised land. And this is the same pattern of Abraham, which we see in the rest of the biblical story. Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Joshua, Saul, David, Solomon, including Mary and Jesus the Christ, who go out, leaving their familiar, daring to risk and enter into terra incognito, the land unknown. And why they do all this? For the greater glory of God, for the greater development and prosperity of their community. Bible tells us finally about God sending His own Son on this hero's journey. It is God's willingness to let go of His godliness. That's what we read in letter to the Philippians. Though He was in the form of God, He left the familiar. He left being God and entered into risking with the humanity in our sinful nature because He kept the faith. Jesus could have been God all the time and enjoying the dynasty and the palace, but He took the form of a slave, left the familiar, entered to risk with the humanity and with the sinful nature of the humanity. In other words, God emptied Himself by leaving the familiar. God left His cozy domesticity and went on a hero's journey to the land of unlikeliness, to the land of sin, in order to find us, find you, find me, to that promise. He left the familiar to find you and to find me and to draw us back into this abundance of life with God. We have been benefiting, didn't we, from this hero's journey, who left the familiar, like Abraham, into the land of risk, into the land of unknown. Whatever faith we can muster today, it is only an echo of this great person's journey, God's own Son. Whatever we love, we dare, is only the shadow of this person of God who risked to leave his own divinity, to leave the familiar and enter into our own humanity. What am I doing with the faith that I am given? As the gospel concludes, much is given, much is expected of you. What am I given? What am I doing with what I am given? Am I able to light that candle in that room full of darkness and venture on this hero's journey? With what I am given in my faith through my baptism, what am I doing with my faith? Am I risking to leave the familiar and enter into this land incognito, into the unfamiliar, so that God can fill me with prosperity? If you and I call ourselves Christians, following after this great man's journey, this hero's journey, we are called to leave the familiar and to tame our faith so that God finds us doing greater things with what we are given. May you and I dare to leave the familiar and enter into terra incognito for the greater things of life. Amen.